review an auction that took place here in Kansas. It was one of their 2025 sales that happened. But let's stop for a moment and talk about how Kansas works as a state. They are officially classified as a tax deed state, which really what that means is that the county will wait out a redemption period, wait for a redemption period to expire, one that issued by the state, and then they'll just simply foreclose on the property so that they can, sell the properties to recover the delinquent funds. And so it's generally just a straight property sale that you're dealing with whenever you attend a tax deed auction.
Yeah, exactly. Now, they're going to use a premium bid system, which is like many other tax deed states. They're going to start at the back taxes, and whoever bids up to the highest price wins the property. Now, many of the counties will go ahead and conduct the auction on the first Tuesday of September or the fourth Monday in October, but we have seen different dates other than that. That's just generally when they'll go ahead and do it. Now, what they do is they issue what's called a sheriff's deed to the winning bidder, and that's really kind of the same thing as a tax deed. They're going to go ahead and issue those in the name of whoever registered for the auction.
Yeah, I mean, a sheriff's deed is basically a non-warranty deed, kind of like a quitclaim deed. It's right along those same lines. The county isn't guaranteeing anything when they issue it. And again, you can also turn the sheriff's deed, into a warranty deed again, or into an insurable deed for title insurance if you want to go through a quiet title action to get the title cleared up. But yeah, they also do have some over-the-counter opportunities that that are there because of the way that Kansas is spread out. The opportunities kind of vary. In some of the bigger city areas, like for instance, in the Kansas City area, they have a lot of over-the-counter properties and over-the-counter inventory that you can look through. In other parts of Kansas, though, as you move further west, you tend to have smaller areas and less of that. Although some of those areas also have some over-the-counter stuff that can be that can be available, but tends to be smaller.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and like Shade said, Kansas City, Kansas actually has a big land bank with a lot of good opportunities available. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to look up, take a look at the Shawnee County sale that took place last year and kind of go over some of the properties that sold within the auction. Okay, perfect. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and look at a number of different properties that sold at the 2025 auction. Now, this first one we're looking at ended up selling for $2,600, and we can kind of see some of the details here on it. Now, one thing I kind of noticed is that their assessed value, in fact, we were just talking this recently earlier in the podcast, that the assessed or appraised value many times isn't going to be exactly what the market value is.
Yeah, we can't always really trust that. We're usually trying to find comps near the property to set the value for it, especially when we're doing an initial evaluation. We're looking for the fastest way that we can get an idea of what the value is. So the county's saying it's worth $50,000. We know it's worth at least $50,000, but it may be worth quite a bit more than that. We really don't know until we see what some of the comps around it say.
Yeah, in fact, this is one of the most frustrating things about this, is that this particular area, in fact, I almost didn't go through it because they don't provide you with any type of comps. They must have something set up with their local MLS where you can't see any of the sold prices within there. So if we were trying to do a market analysis on this, we'd probably have to get with a realtor or find some other way. Maybe the counties, we can get it through the county, but they don't have it on Redfin or Zillow like they would in any other place.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting. It's certainly a case where it's a part of data brokers and where they provide information and where they hold it back. And yeah, I think probably working with the realtor may be the only way to get some of the sales comps in this area. We can see that Redfin puts the value of the property at about $100,000.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and you might be able to get it through the county. In fact, if I had time, I would have checked to see if you could get it through the county. This next property ended up selling for about $6,100. And one thing I do like is they provide photos of the property. You can have additional information here as well. But in kind of looking at it, you can kind of see why it ended up selling for, the other property sold for 20 grand and this property sold for 6,100.
Yeah, so the image is from April of 2024. It's about 2 years old. And some of the things that we can look at, I mean, clearly they must be fire, they have a wood burning stove there. They must, because they've got a lot of a lot of firewood stacked up around there. But the roof doesn't look terrible. I mean, I've seen houses that look far worse. Certainly, yeah, there's an exterior uh, garage or some kind of a shed there that could be used as well. Um, I've seen a lot worse. I mean, it looks kind of junky here in the front. If you acquired the property, you would need to do cleanup with it. But the house itself doesn't look that bad.
Yeah. In fact, I'm not sure where I might. Let's check it real quick. Thought I had the value pulled up next, but I think it was valued at about 54,000. So, it's a little undervalued. They picked it up, but like Shade said, there's some qualities in there that probably still made it a pretty good deal at that price.
Yeah, I mean, they bought it for 10% of value roughly. And that is going to be a good deal no matter how you do it. I mean, even if you needed to put some money into the property. Now, it is a value limited property, so it's not one that you can go and put $100,000 kitchen in. But it is a property though that you could probably just merely clean up and turn around and sell. I mean, at the price they paid at, they'll probably be highly profitable.
Yeah, yeah. This next property ended up selling for 15,100. We can see that as far as the county assessed value, it's a little low. But when we look into the market value, that's what's really going to be the most important. It does look like, at least from this photo, we can see when this photo was taken, which is going to be helpful. At that time, I'm not quite sure. It may have been occupied. We can see here when this was, so that was in 2024.
Yeah, it
This
kind of
was,
looks like it could have been vacant. Oh, I
yeah,
guess there's a truck in front of it.
yeah. Well, and this might connect to this house here. It could be, but there's definitely a ton of weeds growing on. So it looked a little bit more like somebody was living in it here in 8/20/24. But this looks like May 2024. So this is actually after this. So I almost kind of wonder if someone might have moved in since then, or if there's just been a bunch of extra growth since then.
Yeah, in either case, it being vacant, I mean, a lot of homes sit vacant for a time. It looks like it was in decent shape up until it went vacant. I mean, the house itself doesn't look too bad in terms of condition. Built in 56, it's about 1,000 square feet. So it's a 3 bedroom, 1 bath, and
Yeah,
valued at 73. They say they paid 15 for it.
yeah, about 15 grand.
Yeah,
So I don't.
that's a doable deal.
Yeah, it's a workable deal. This next one here was kind of interesting, and they ended up paying uh, almost $17,000 for it. But as I looked a little bit more into it, I could kind of see why. In fact, let's look at here on the map as well. We've got a photo of it here, and I was curious to see what the market values are, but that was a little bit tougher within this area.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Oh,
There,
so it's a big concrete pad, like so there used to be a structure there.
yeah, well, and right across the street is a Sonic. There's a bunch of businesses here, and so this is a major road. In fact, there's actually a a billboard on the property as well. So, you'd be interested to see, if there's an easement on there or not, but you may have access to rental income through a billboard on the property. And I think there used to be a bar here or something like that, but you can
Yeah.
kind of see, good enough location to build a Sonic, and this lot would be big enough to do something as well. So, I'm not quite sure what the market value would be on it. There's nothing there on Redfin, but we can see that it sold back in 2000 for 125, but that's probably when there was some type of structure still on there. But it's a good, 0.4 acre lot right there on a commercial street with possible billboard opportunity.
Yeah, well, I think for the cost that let's see, how much did the property sell for?
It sold for 15,000.
Yeah,
No, 16, almost 17 grand, 16,900.
yeah, even at 17,000 with it being a commercial property, and I think I saw that the county's estimate was like 40,000 on it.
Yeah,
Yeah, this will
I'm
be a
guessing
pretty
it's
good.
worth 80 to 100, maybe more.
Yeah, well, and it's $17,000 purchase price. Uh, they've got all the room in the world to move on it if they want, but they also have a good chance at making $40,000+ on it. I mean, they have the ability to make pretty good money on a deal like this, or even more. They could make 50,000 on a property like this and potentially have it sold. Topeka is an area that I guess, I actually lived in Topeka for a little while, and it's not a bad city. I think there are, you know, it's an enjoyable place. I think there's, the real estate there is not too bad, and there's good opportunities with real estate, but there's also valuable real estate there. You see both ends of it, where you have, at least I remember seeing new construction there along with old construction here, just in different parts of town. And so opportunities, especially for a commercial property like that on a busy road.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I think there's plenty of good value there, and it makes sense. I mean, I think maybe even we'd have to do market value, but even at 20,000, it could be a decent deal. Now they ended up paying up this for this home, and they ended up paying 26,100 for it. We can see some of the details of the property here. It was valued at $70,000, and so they were willing to pay up for it. And I think that you know maybe because the condition, you can see that there's a new roof, also, in the area. So I'm not sure, because I can't check the comps, how good of deal this was. If we just take and say it's worth 70,000, they paid, you know, uh, 26,000 for it. They paid a lot more for that property than some of the other properties. But what's kind of frustrating is we can't determine why by looking at what the comparables in the areas are selling for.
It's also right at that, the bottom of the house prices where, at 26,000, they're going to be in a pretty strong position with this property, which does look like it's had some work done. Somebody, put the money to get a new roof placed on it. So we don't have all original things in it. And that may extend beyond that. I mean, if they went through the effort to put a new roof like that on it, then things like the electrical and plumbing could very well be updated as well, which would be a huge save. Um, yeah, I mean, there are other things that you could also start replacing on the house. Like, you can see that it needs, it would need windows. What's appealing about the house is that it's very simple and it's small. And so doing things like updating it is only going to cost so much, because rather than needing to replace 50 windows, you've got 4 windows. You've got a very limited amount of square footage that you have to fix up. All of that makes this property a little bit easier to digest that way. So 26,000, I think this is a win, because what they place it at 75,000, I think is probably a number that could change also, depending on what you did to the property.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's part of the reason why doing a real market analysis is so important. Now, this one was kind of interesting. They ended up paying 14,100 for it. Now we can see that it looks like a piece of land here. The county has placed a value of about 60,000 on it, and this may have been one of my favorite kind of properties as far as the land is concerned. We'll go ahead and look at the map here. As that's pulling up, it's actually this area right here, so we can see all of these new construction here. And there's some type of
Bank.
yeah, look at all that parking for it. But then right over here, you can see it's this portion. So I don't know if maybe you could have it zoned commercial, maybe you could have it zoned residential, but it's this big lot right here, and it's, you see the size of it. I think it was like 2.5 acres.
Yeah, 2.51.
Oh yeah, 2.51. So, it's a big lot. I don't know why.
How much did they pay for it again? I didn't see that.
It was 14,100.
That's right, 14,000, and they're placing it at $60,000 value. And that's one thing that's nice about the value that they set is that in this case we can almost kind of treat it as a bottom, bottom dollar amount, and then kind of work the value up from there. And so even at 60,000, if we were looking at it, you could make the numbers work at that. They paid about 25% of value, but if it's worth more than 60,000, then they did pretty well.
Oh, I think I'm just guessing, but if it's a usable property, I think it's worth double that, if not more. But you can see, it kind of goes all the way up to where this subdivision is, goes along this road. So if somebody wanted to buy it for their house, they could obviously, make it that way, or it could be used as a commercial property as well. It kind of starts right around here and then goes all the way to here. So it may even be able to put like a big apartment building or make it into twin homes or something like that.
And subdivide it into 2 lots or something if you wanted. Or
Yeah, well, and if somebody wanted to make higher quality townhouses, for example, you could probably put 20 units on there.
yeah,
Even if you had 15 or 20, that would be a pretty good setup, and it would work good for this location where you're kind of getting close to town, but you're also here where these homes are $300,000 to $400,000 homes.
yeah. Well, it really would be a good place for some kind of higher density residential there next to the neighborhood homes. That probably would work well for condos or twin homes or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that is interesting.
that's kind of where it's located. There was nothing really there. We'll look at a couple more and then we'll turn it back. This one here sold for 29,000. You can see it's doesn't seem to be too bad of a house. And it valued at about 82,000. So they picked it up for 29. So they paid a little bit more for this one as well. They kind of paid higher for both of these properties. And that's where I'd really love to look into the market and kind of see, what the sales are within the area, because I'll never completely trust either one of these.
Well, and this looks like it's a little bit nicer neighborhood, maybe, slightly higher values.
Yeah. Well, you can see at least on this side of the street, a bunch of these homes are getting redone. Obviously, there was fire damage, but you can see that a lot of these have newer type stuff on them. And I think this is an area that's probably growing. And so they paid a little bit more for it. It could still be worth it. It looked like it was occupied at that time, valued at about 85,000.
Yeah, in fact, it's probably a great area in terms of property values getting up to a point where it will start to make sense to do more remodeling in those properties. At least certainly if they make that cross between going $100,000 properties up to $200,000 properties and above, it makes sense to probably fix up a lot of those properties.
Well, and you're always going to see some that are going to be better deals than others. It's kind of interesting to kind of go through each one of them. This property here ended up selling for 13,900. They valued it at 119,000. So, this one here, as far as what they paid for it, they paid less than 14 grand. And if that value is close, this may be kind of one of the better deals as far as homes are concerned.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like they picked it up for, about 10% of value, maybe 15%, hardly anything for what they paid. And it looks like a mess from the outside, but what's nice is that it's actually fairly cleared out. You just have to move a couple vehicles, and you would have a lot more room, and you could probably use it. In fact, there's a garage, I think, behind that thing. I think it's a single car garage. I can't tell here.
It looks like it may be brick, but this is a house that by cleaning this up, you could give this house a whole new look. If you were to move this stuff, put some stuff into it, and opening it up, would give it a completely different look and would probably really help increase the value overall.
Yeah, and 100, even at 120,000, this deal, if that's what it's valued at, yeah, they did pretty well on it, and they could even fix it up and still be good and profitable with that.
Yeah, so picked up for 14 grand, should be a pretty good deal. This one here ended up paying up a little bit more as well. They paid 30 grand for this one, and it was only valued at 70,000. So I kind of wanted to show one where, well, maybe, but it really kind of depend on the condition of the property if we'd go ahead and pick up this one at 30 grand. You know, if this value is right, they picked it up for about 35 cents on the dollar. Maybe there's a reason why. And we'll look at this last property here, ended up selling for 24,000. Now, one thing I do like about it is it looks like it's in pretty good condition and it's been rehabbed.
Yeah, this one looks like it certainly has new siding on the outside of it. It looked like new windows as well, and not that high of a purchase price, you know, for a property that has been fixed up some here. The roof looks pretty good on it. Looks nice and straight.
Yeah, valued at 109. So, you know, not too bad, especially picking it up at that. Actually, this one was picked up for 24,000. So this is the one they paid 30,000 for. So I was wrong. You know, this one here above that they paid less for. They only paid 14,000 for this one, and they ended up paying 30,000 for this one.
It makes sense. It makes sense. It's a little bit more competitive bidding because it looked newer on the outside. It presented a little bit better than some of the other properties.
Yeah, well, and it's also higher valued. So, you know, paying 30,000 for this one makes more sense because it's valued at, you know, let's say 110, and, you know, looks like it was built in 55, but I would say that rehab, at least the new roof, the, you know, the new windows, I mean, you may look at putting central air, that's a little bit, you know, but other than that, it looks like a pretty good home, and there's some things that you could do with it that could really help clean it up, take all of this out, and, you know, really help this in reselling.
Yeah, it seems like it's halfway there to being a good income producing property and, you know, really good investment. Is the prices that they paid, that's pretty good. And you say this one they paid 24 for?
Yeah, this one here they paid 24 for.
Wow.
You see the county has it assessed at in about, you know, 78, 79,000. The market value on it, they have it at about 137, 140,000. You can see it's a little bit bigger, 5-bedroom, 2-bath. And this one may take a little bit more work, but, you know, it very well could have some value. You can see how it does need some work there, but it's a pretty big structure, you know, and has a little bit higher value. And from what I can see, I think some of these homes in the area might be a little bit more valuable.
Yeah, it is a little bit bigger property. And at least at the price they paid there, a lot of how, I guess what will happen with this, you know, kind of comes down to the condition on the inside and what they want to do. Although that low of a purchase price at 24,000, I'm sure they wouldn't have a problem selling the property no matter what they do. You know, they picked it up at a low enough price compared to the value there that if they just want to sell it and, you know, kind of do nothing with the property, they probably have the option to do that.
Yeah, and well, and that may be the best step for it, is to go ahead and clean it out. You know, they picked it up for 24 grand. Maybe they spent another couple grand cleaning it up, changing the locks, and then trying to sell it for 75 grand. You know, that leaves somebody to go in there, still be able to rehab the property, you know, and if it's rehabbed, it could very well have a higher value than this. So that gives you kind of an idea of Kansas. We're trying to find different areas we can find auctions from. In some states, they haven't had their sales yet, and so we may need to go back and look at the 2025. But I'll go ahead and hand this back to you, Shade, and we'll start going through some of the other stuff.